Max Verstappen is a four-time world champion. And if you watch the last few years, you know why that matters. Because this isn't just a guy with a great car. This is a driver who turned dominance into routine, pressure into fuel, and rivals into background noise. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Formula One isn't designed to let any king rule forever. And 2026 is the kind of year that ends dynasties. Quietly, surgically, and all at once. So let me ask you a question that sounds crazy today, but won't sound crazy for long. What if Max Verstappen doesn't lose because he gets slower, but because the sport changes in a way that makes his greatest advantage irrelevant? Stay with me, because by the end of this video I'm going to name the single biggest reason Max could suddenly look beatable in 2026, and the one team most likely to benefit from it. And no, this isn't a hot take, it's hiding in the 2026 rules themselves. Here's the first thing most fans don't fully process. 2026 isn't just a new car, it's a new Formula One. New chassis philosophy, new aero approach, and, most importantly, new power units built around a radically different balance of energy. The sport is pushing toward much more electrical power than the current era, and that one shift has ended eras before. Because when F1 changes how power is created and deployed, everything else follows. Your aero concept changes, your cooling approach changes, your race strategy changes, even your driver inputs change. And the teams who get it right early don't just win a few races, they often control the era. Now you might be thinking, Max adapts, Red Bull adapts, they'll be fine. And you might be right. But you're missing the part that makes 2026 dangerous. In 2026, the power unit is expected to deliver around 50% of its power from the electrical system, up from roughly 20% in the previous spec. The MGK jumps to 350 kW, nearly 3 times the old 120 kW. That's not a tweak, that's a new sport inside the same sport. And the second you hear 50% electrical, you should immediately think software, battery efficiency, deployment strategy, energy recovery rate, thermal management, and the uncomfortable reality that the best race car might not be the one with the prettiest aero anymore, it might be the one with the smartest energy brain. Now here comes the first cliffhanger. If the 2026 era becomes an energy management war, what happens to the team whose dominance was built on aerodynamic mastery and an ultra-stable platform, when the biggest performance lever becomes electrical efficiency and control? Because that's where the story stops being about Max and starts being about the machine around him. Red Bull's current era has been defined by ruthless execution and insane aerodynamic efficiency. But 2026 introduces a variable Red Bull has not truly faced during this dynasty, a brand new in-house engine project at full scale. Red Bull powertrains, supported by Ford, are building a power unit from the ground up for 2026. That sounds exciting. It also sounds terrifying. Because in Formula One, designing the best chassis and aero package is hard. Designing a championship-winning power unit from scratch, under new rules, while everyone else is also rebuilding? That's the kind of challenge that can humble even the smartest organizations. And here's why this matters. Max Verstappen doesn't just win because he's Max. He wins because the whole Red Bull ecosystem is built to put him in a car that feels planted, predictable, and brutally fast in the exact places that win races. If the new era produces a car that's unpredictable, because energy deployment is inconsistent, because software mapping is tricky, because cooling limits force compromises, then Max's biggest weapon, confidence, becomes harder to access. That doesn't mean he becomes bad. It means his dominance becomes vulnerable. And vulnerability is all rivals need. Now let's make this even more uncomfortable for Red Bull. While Red Bull is building a new power unit project, another manufacturer is returning to the top level of the engine war with something to prove. Mercedes. And before you roll your eyes, listen, Mercedes didn't just dominate the hybrid era, they wrote the textbook. They became the reference point for how to integrate chassis and power unit into one complete performance system. And 2026 pushes the sport deeper into the exact territory Mercedes historically understood better than anyone, hybrid energy management. Even right now, the paddock chatter going into 2026 has Mercedes being viewed as a serious contender. Reuters reporting has already put George Russell as a popular favourite in 2026 betting talk, with Russell himself expecting Verstappen and Red Bull to be back in the fight, meaning even the people inside the sport believe Red Bull won't disappear, but also that the fight could be real again. And that leads to a brutal truth. Max doesn't need Red Bull to collapse to lose in 2026. He just needs one team to start the era half a step ahead. Half a step ahead in Formula One is an era. Now let's talk about the car itself, because the 2026 chassis isn't 2025 but different. The FIA and F1 have been clear that 2026 cars are designed to be smaller, lighter, more agile, with active aerodynamics concepts that change how cars behave on straights versus corners. Active aero adds another layer of complexity: how you switch modes, how stable the car feels across those transitions, how the driver trusts the platform while managing energy deployment. The car becomes more dynamic. That's exciting, and also a perfect recipe for unexpected winners early. Here's the second cliffhanger. What if Max's biggest enemy in 2026 isn't another driver's raw pace, but an early season car that doesn't give him the same "I can place it" on a knife-edge confidence he's used to? Because that's how eras flip, not with one dramatic failure, with a subtle shift in feel. Now let's zoom out, because Max's problem in 2026 isn't only technical, it's also mathematical. If you look at major regulation resets across F1 history, the reigning order almost never survives intact. That's not opinion. That's the core nature of the sport. Resets reward preparation, not momentum. Teams that build for the next era early get disproportionate rewards, because the cost cap and development restrictions make catching up harder once someone finds the right concept. And here's the uncomfortable part for Red Bull. While they were busy winning, other teams were busy rebuilding. McLaren have been rising, and according to Reuters, 2025 ended with Lando Norris winning the title and Verstappen coming up just short, within striking distance of a fifth crown, but not quite getting it. That matters because it signals something. The inevitable feeling is already cracking. The moment one rival believes they can beat you consistently, the whole grid changes its mindset. And mindset matters in a regulation reset year. Now I want to address the thing that will determine whether Max suddenly loses in 2026 or remains the benchmark: energy deployment consistency. Remember that 350 kW MGK figure? That's massive. If teams don't manage energy properly, drivers won't have predictable power where they expect it, especially in wheel-to-wheel fights. That means the new era can create a new kind of overtaking and defending pattern, where the driver who best understands when to harvest, when to deploy, and how to manipulate energy modes becomes lethal. This is where the sport can produce a new Max, a driver who clicks instantly with the energy game. And yes, Max is smart enough to learn it. But the advantage can still shift, because this isn't only about the driver, it's about the team's software philosophy, the battery pack's behavior, the cooling system's trade-offs, and the way the chassis integrates with the power unit. Which brings us to the scariest part of all for Red Bull. 2026 is not just a car reset, it's a manufacturer integration reset. And that's where teams like Mercedes and Ferrari traditionally thrive. They've been doing integrated chassis plus power unit development for a very long time. Red Bull are brilliant, but they are also building a new power unit operation at scale. F1's own reporting has described the Red Bull power unit project as mammoth, noting the recruitment push, including staff from rivals, and the fact that Honda's 2026 return will be with Aston Martin, not Red Bull. Which sets up a very real possibility: Red Bull may be good in 2026, but not untouchable right away. And in F1, losing untouchable is the beginning of losing championships. Now, quick pit stop, subscribe moment, but with honesty. If you're still watching, you're officially the kind of person who would survive a 46-lap race without checking Twitter. That's rare. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown, and also because it makes you 0.2 seconds faster in your next karting session. Again, can't prove it, but why gamble? Now, let's talk about the one thing that can turn close fight into sudden defeat for Max: the first 6 races of 2026. In reset years, the first part of the season often determines the entire arc. Because upgrades arrive slower, development directions lock in, and teams either confirm they're on the right path or panic and chase shadows. If Red Bull start 2026 with a car that's slightly unpredictable and a power unit that's not yet optimized, Max could still drag results. He could still win races. But he might not be able to control the championship narrative the way he has before. And if another team, especially one with a strong power unit start, builds an early points advantage, suddenly Max is not the hunter with calm control. He's the hunter under time pressure. and time pressure creates mistakes. Not necessarily from Max, but from the system around him. Strategy calls, reliability gambles, setup decisions, development choices. Here's the third cliffhanger. What if Max doesn't lose because he gets beaten on Sundays, but because the first third of 2026 puts him in a points hole that even he can't climb out of? Because that's how championships die quietly. Not with a crash, with a calendar. Now, you might ask, who is most likely to capitalize? The obvious candidates are Mercedes and McLaren, with Ferrari always lurking. But if we're being brutally honest, the reason I keep circling back to Mercedes is because the 2026 rules lean toward their historical strengths, energy systems, hybrid integration, and technical organization around power unit development. F1's explainer has emphasized that deleting the MGUH doesn't reduce electrical reliance, it increases it, and the new system's recovery and deployment is a major part of performance. If Mercedes nail that early, they don't need to be perfect everywhere else, they just need to be strong enough to give their drivers a weapon. And yes, the drivers matter. George Russell has been openly linked to 2026 contender status in mainstream coverage, and the idea that he could be right there isn't random fantasy. Which sets up an uncomfortable sentence for Max fans. Max Verstappen might enter 2026 as the best driver on the grid and still not be the favourite. Now, another factor that gets ignored in fan debates, the style shift. Smaller, lighter cars change how you attack corners, how you follow, how you manage tyres, and how you position the car. Active aero adds transitions. Energy management adds phases. The driver workload changes. Some drivers thrive on stability, some thrive on chaos. Max has shown he can thrive in both, but if the new car requires a slightly different rhythm, that opens the door for rivals whose driving style aligns perfectly with the new platform. And when two drivers are close, the team advantage becomes the deciding factor. So let's answer the title question honestly. Why could Max suddenly lose in 2026? Because 2026 attacks the exact foundations that made Red Bull's recent dominance so difficult to stop. It introduces a new power unit era where energy management and software efficiency become massive. It introduces a new chassis and aero philosophy with active aero layers. It forces Red Bull to prove their new power unit project immediately against manufacturers with deep hybrid integration history. And it gives rivals a clean slate, where early momentum can become an era. That's not anti-Max. That's just how Formula One works. Now, final subscribe moment, because if we're going to be serious about growth, we need to actually ask for it smartly. If you want more 2026 breakdowns like this, Red Bull versus Mercedes, Hamilton in Ferrari, Aston Martin's Honda return era, subscribe now. It's free, it takes 1 second, and it helps YouTube understand that you and I both enjoy overthinking downforce like it's a life skill. Now here's the payoff. The single biggest threat to Max in 2026 is not a driver, it's not even a team name. It's the possibility that Red Bull's 2026 package is great, but not perfect from day one, especially on the power unit integration side, while another team starts the era with energy deployment mastery. Because in an era where roughly half the power comes from the electrical side, the team that controls that side controls the lap time, the overtakes, and the race narrative. If that happens, Max doesn't become irrelevant. He becomes human. And once Max is human, Formula One becomes chaos again. But let me leave you with one last twist, because this is where the story gets scary for everyone else. If 2026 becomes a close fight, and the gap closes, and Max is forced into real wheel-to-wheel championship pressure again, that's also the environment where he's at his most dangerous. If Red Bull are close enough to win, you might not be watching the end of a dynasty. You might be watching the beginning of the most ruthless Verstappen era yet. One where he isn't cruising, he's hunting. So the real truth is this: 2026 might be the year Max suddenly loses. Or it might be the year Formula One finds out what Max Verstappen looks like when he has to fight for everything again. And if that happens, the rest of the grid should be terrified. Because the moment dominance turns into a war, the best driver usually wins the war. And Max Verstappen has been winning wars since he was a teenager. Now tell me in the comments, who do you think benefits most from 2026? Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Aston Martin, or Red Bull again?